Hello and welcome to episode 26 of Within the Boggart Wood. For any new listeners out there, the podcast looks at history, archaeology, folklore, myths, legends and ghost lore, focusing primarily on the northern counties of England and the Scottish borders, but also occasionally looking nationally and in some cases internationally. In the majority of stories I don't try to go too much into detail. Instead I hope that what I tell you is interesting enough that some of you may decide to delve down those research rabbit holes yourself. To start this episode off, I would like to say a big thank you to Michelle Suzanne, who has become the podcast's newest Patreon supporter. I would also like to offer my thanks to Apple listener DJR58 from Australia for their 5-star review, which reads, "I do like the podcast Within the Boggart Wood for the unusual stories and the narrator's voice, despite being a skeptic about ghosts and the paranormal. You and me both on the skeptical side, DJR58. Today's first story is actually a site visit. Over the last couple of years, the archaeological excavation at Carlisle Cricket Club in Cumbria, northwest England, has hit both national and international news with its fantastic finds. The press developed an interest in the site mid-2023, and back in December of last year the BBC announced that the community excavation of the Roman remains had won 3 international awards, and to date had found over 2,000 archaeological artefacts, including Roman coins and pottery, as well as one of the largest collections of intaglios in the country. Intaglios are engraved gemstones, likely lost in the Roman baths when the steam melted the glue holding the semi-precious stones in jewellery such as signet rings. 2 somewhat larger finds, those being the discovery of 2 wonderful carved stone heads, thought to depict 2nd century gods, also stood out and captured people's attention, followed by the discovery of a small stone carved dolphin head. Earlier this year the excavations hit the news again, when post-excavation work on the remains of the debris from the 3rd century Roman bathhouse drains revealed the presence of Tyrian purple, an incredibly rare purple pigment which was only used in conjunction with the imperial court of the Roman Empire. The pigment was made from crushed seashells from the eastern Mediterranean and North Africa, and was at the time worth more than gold. So far the congealed lump found in the drains at Carlisle is the only known sample of the unused paint pigment in northern Europe. The 30th of May 2024 marked the beginning of the new digging season at the cricket club, which lasts until Saturday 15th of June. So this week I went along and volunteered for the day. The site is run by staff from Wardle Armstrong Archaeology, with the diggers being volunteers from around the country and around the world. When there was a moment to spare, I managed to sit down with Frank Giecco and his daughter Anna to quickly discuss the site. Apologies for the sound quality, as the recording was done out in the open air and some visitors decided to have a chat next to us halfway through the recording.
So I'm Frank Giecco, Wardle Armstrong, and I'm site director for Uncovering Roman Carlisle, and we've been excavating this site since 2017 on and off, and it's one of the largest community projects in England.
Are you enjoying doing it?
I enjoy it. I won't be doing it mainly on my annual leave and it's weekends. No, it's a fantastic project, and it's great archaeology, but it's also a great community we've created. We have 2,300 members now with the group.
Everybody seems very happy there today.
It's a lovely site because we keep on finding nice things that keeps people happy. It's hard work,
yeah.
But
so do you know roughly what the site is? Because I know it's advertised as a bathhouse, but it's obviously something a bit...
Oh no, it's not a bathhouse per se. We have a bathhouse, a Hadrianic bathhouse, but the building, the Severin building that everyone gets excited about, it's more like a villa than a bathhouse. It's got a suite of baths within it, but it's far bigger than a bathhouse. The plan of it is unique in Britain, so it's quite a special building.
Yeah, good stuff. And have you got any earlier material than Romans, or is it just all Roman?
We got some Mesolithic flints we found, a couple of Bronze Age flints, and we got, well, still Roman, but we got a nice Republican coin of about 109 BC.
Nice.
Yeah. But the main site starts in the Hadrianic period, and it goes through right to the Edwardian period.
Yeah. Good stuff. So obviously you've got, 20 volunteers here a day?
20 to 30.
Yeah. Obviously there's other companies do the community archaeology model as a pay per day, but am I right in thinking that it's actually free?
Everything's free, yeah, we never ask. That was one of the things when he got it running. I want it to be free for anyone. It's trying to be as inclusive as we can.
Yeah. And Anna, you're dealing with the social media marketing and finds side, as well as looking after the site while Frank's not here, is that right?
Yeah, I'm doing the marketing and photography mainly of the whole project, really. So working a lot with how we can make the project more available online to people who can't come, or people that want to catch up with it that can't come on site every day.
So what social media channels have you got?
So we've got Instagram and Facebook, and we're doing a daily dig diary to update everyone. So anyone who doesn't come for one day can keep up with the dig.
Yeah, and you've got lots of nice small finds coming out, haven't you?
Yeah, we've had loads already. I think we're up to around 40 coins from only 9 days on site. Then we've already got some beads coming up, and then some nice cups and beakers, and lots of pottery as well.
Yeah, well, earlier on there was the 2 complete small beakers that came up.
Yeah, that was pretty nice.
What sort of age deposit are they coming from?
I think they'll be probably Antonine. It's roadside activity, so they're discarded possibly in the top of a roadside ditch.
Yeah.
But we still haven't got into that area properly. We're still scratching the surface.
Literally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've only just basically been clearing the site.
Yeah.
We haven't really got down to the interesting bits properly yet.
Planning comes next.
Yeah, I'll be leaving. Right, well, thank you very much. I'll catch up with you both again in a couple of weeks as well.
Yeah, you're welcome, Tony.
Yeah, thank you very much. So again, many thanks to Frank, Anna and the rest of the Uncovering Roman Carlisle project for their hospitality. And while I wasn't lucky enough to discover anything wonderful while I was there myself, I did witness the palpable excitement of the volunteers who were carefully cleaning back the Roman roadside ditch material under Anna Giecco's watchful eye, and came across 2 fantastic, complete small Roman drinking cups, sitting unscathed by time, likely where they'd been dropped or thrown sometime in the 2nd century AD. I'll put photographs of the cups and from the visit in the episode page, along with links to the Uncovering Roman Carlisle project and social media. One thing to note is that while all volunteer spaces for the summer excavation season have been booked now, there will be a further season of excavation in the autumn. So if you're interested, keep an eye on the project website. So, moving from archaeology to ghost lore, we'll stay initially in Carlisle and look to the Carlisle Examiner on the 29th of November 1864, which read, "The good people of Milbourne Street have seen a ghost, and the old ladies and little boys are very angry if you doubt it." A tall ghost it was, very tall, and excepting a cadaverous face too terrible to look on, his ghostship's person was enveloped in the traditional drapery of his class, a white sheet. It walked very fast, and on one occasion it dodged up a lane to balk a too inquisitive follower. It is popularly supposed to be some unquiet spirit paying visit to the cemetery, and from a Glasgow paper we observe that a similar appearance has been observed among the tombs of the necropolis. Be that as it may, the ghost has his believers in Milbourne Street. The reference to the necropolis ghost in Glasgow had been covered in the Dundee Courier 6 days earlier, and had spread over a number of other publications in the intervening days with a number of different versions. The Dundee Courier's version read, "One of those absurd stories which spread amongst masses of people in a way which no one can explain, has just caused not a little commotion in the southern part of Glasgow. In the early part of last week, the report was propagated that the figure of a man dressed in white was to be seen at night seated on the tombstones in the southern necropolis. The strange visitant, according to popular rumour, had a small lantern by his side and was busily employed in writing letters to shopkeepers and others. He was, however, peacefully inclined, for so long as no one attempted to interfere with him, he was to harm nobody. But the moment that hands were to be laid upon his sacred person, he was to have recourse to a loaded pistol, his ghostly majesty not being beneath the vulgar use of firearms. When the story first became current, little credence was given to it, and on the evenings of Tuesday and Wednesday last, but few persons turned out to witness the strange proceedings alleged to be occurring in the burying ground. Public curiosity, however, became excited, and on the 2 following evenings some hundreds of people had assembled at the spot, but they were doomed to disappointment, for nothing was to be seen. This, however, had not the effect of dissipating the absurd delusion, as a crowd which numbered some thousands were drawn to the spot on the evening of Sunday last. As there was nothing to feed their curiosity, they at last became most unruly, engaged in shouting and yelling and other noisy demonstrations, and also in throwing stones. There was a small body of police on the spot, but the attempts which they made quietly to disperse the mob were unavailing, and one of the constables was somewhat severely wounded on the face by a brick which was thrown at him. A number of the crowd, unknown to the police, made their way over to one of the walls which surround the burying ground and broke open the door of a small building, destroying or carrying off some of the books kept by the person in charge of the place, and doing other damage. This would appear to have been done out of pure spirit of mischief, and was only discovered on Monday morning. Seeing the turn which the proceedings had taken on Sunday evening, it was felt necessary to prevent the crowd from gathering on Monday night, and accordingly a small force of constables was dispatched to the spot, with instructions to take decisive measures should such be necessary. Their services were, however, fortunately not required, as nobody assembled. Whether this was owing to the popular belief in the appearance of the ghost having exhausted itself, from the unearthly visitant never having condescended to reveal himself in any shape to any one, we do not know, but it is possible enough that it partly arose from this, that, as the story goes, His Ghostly Majesty was on Monday night to pay a visit to Cathcart burial ground, and did not intend to return to his old quarters for some time at least, as he designed to make a descent upon Cambuslang on Tuesday night, and next night upon Campsie Glen. Another circumstance which may have weighed with the frequenters of the ground around the necropolis is that 4 young lads of 15 or 16 years of age, named John Waddell, James Waddell, Andrew Brown and James Mains, were taken into custody and placed at the bar of the Southern Police Court on Monday forenoon, charged with committing a breach of the peace on Sunday evening, informing part of the crowd, and each received a fine of 2 shillings 6 pence. While many were drawn to the spot from the love of mischief, and looked upon the whole affair as a hoax, there can be no doubt that others lent credence to the absurd tale, and that it excited terror in not a few quarters. Apropos of the supernatural manifestations, several stories are told, one of the most amusing of which is that some youths of a waggish turn constructed with white paper the form of a man, suspended it on one of the evenings in question from a conspicuous place in the large work of the neighbourhood. The private watchman had occasion to pass the spot in making his midnight inspection of the premises, and was horrified when, on turning a corner, he saw what he believed to be the veritable ghost. He had, however, sufficient courage to seize hold of a brickbat and let it fly at the white object directly in front of him, but as the figure only swayed to a side as if eluding the missile, this increased his terror, and he lustily shouted for help. His cries brought assistance, when his courage was reassured on finding that it was only a paper man which had so disturbed his equanimity. The story went quiet for 70 years. Then in 1933 it seemed to some that the ghost may have returned to the Glasgow Necropolis. In the Edinburgh Evening News on the 7th of October was the following article. Alarm was caused by reports of mysterious lights and movements among the tombstones in the Glasgow Necropolis. Large crowds gathered round the cemetery last night after dark. It was freely circulated that the police were patrolling the grounds. It was stated that ghosts had been seen flitting among the graves, or alternatively that vandals had attempted to open a grave. The true explanation was given to a reporter today by the superintendent of the cemetery. The mysterious figures were those of police officers guarding a grave on which there were a number of valuable wreaths, and the lights were from their torches. During their vigil on the last 2 nights, the police were observed by a nurse at the Royal Infirmary, which overlooks the necropolis. She informed police headquarters. Officers who were sent to investigate found that the supposed vandals were their own colleagues. From the northwest we now move across to the northeast of England and to Staindrop in County Durham, from where I'd read a report of some ghostly shenanigans taking place in the 1870s, reported to the Newcastle magazine under the heading Ghost Law in South Durham. The magazine article dealt with a report provided to the magazine by a Mrs. Brooke, a local dressmaker and self-professed ghost seer who'd worked at a public house in Staindrop as a young woman. The pub, it was said, had long been a haunted house before it became a tavern, and when Mrs. Brooke started work there, one day she was bringing onions down from the long room to the kitchen when she heard a heavy footstep behind her on the stairs, which followed her all the way down. By the time she reached the kitchen, she was white and trembling, but the landlady dismissed the story. Later, however, the landlady confessed that the noise she'd heard was Old Cloggy, named for the sound of the ghost's heavy footfall often heard on the stairs. The story went that the son of a former occupant of the house, before it became a tavern, had hanged himself in the stairwell and haunted the place of his death since then. She'd heard old Cloggy so many times, though, that she'd simply gotten used to his presence and hadn't wanted to alarm Mrs. Brooke. On the 14th of June 1872, the Northern Echo put out a challenge asking readers in the area if anyone else had experienced the spirits claimed by Mrs. Brooke, but the silence appears to have been deafening, and at that point the trail on old Cloggy went stale. Looking for ghost stories attached to Staindrop, it did dig up a few more tales though. The first was of a spectral horseman, his face covered in blood, seen riding on a white horse. The horse and rider apparently had been spotted on the A688 between Staindrop and Raby Castle, with the horse and rider allegedly disappearing at full gallop into a hillside without a trace. Unfortunately, barring one mention in a local book on ghosts, I wasn't actually able to find any more references, so I'm unsure when this story first surfaced. Then there's the tale of Johnny Reed, also based in Staindrop. Johnny Reed was a farmer at Staindrop who, according to local folklore, was heading home one evening and crossed the old bridge, when much to his surprise a cat jumped out in front of him, looked him full in the face and snarled, Johnny Reed, tell Madame Momfoot that Mally Dixon's deed." Somewhat startled by the fact that a cat had spoken to him, never mind that the rhyme only worked if said in the northeast accent, Johnny took to his heels and fled home. Once safely inside the farmhouse, he told his family of the strange encounter, wondering who on earth Madame Momfoot was, never mind how a cat had spoken to him. No sooner had he declared Mally Dixon's death, though, that their own black cat shot to his feet, looked at him strangely, and said, "Is she?" before heading at speed out into the night. Whether the cat was a witch's familiar, or one of the fairy folk in disguise, soon became the talk of the town, though it was a question which of course was never answered. Of course, researching the weird and wonderful in Staindrop brought up tales of Raby Castle. Raby Castle is a Grade 1 listed building, located less than a mile to the north of Staindrop. It was originally built in the early 14th century, with licence to crenellate granted in 1379. The castle was partly demolished and rebuilt about 1620, besieged in 1648, then altered extensively in the 18th and 19th centuries. Raby Castle's premier ghost appears to be the spirit of Charles Neville, 6th Earl of Westmoreland, who has been seen pacing angrily through the Baron's Hall, where it is said he met with the Percy family in 1569 prior to the rising of the North. Then, in the library, there is a somewhat rotund gentleman, said to be talking or dictating, though his head is quite detached from his body and resting on the table next to him. The ghost written about in the 19th century folklore, though, is that of the First Lady Barnard's ghost, affectionately known as the Old Hellcat. It is said that in life Elizabeth was a jealous, bitter woman, married to Christopher Vane, who became the first Lord Barnard in 1698. The folk tale goes that she became enraged over her son's Gilbert's choice of wife, and rather than seeing her son and his hated wife eventually inherit Raby, she turned her husband against them both and persuaded him to actually demolish the castle. Allegedly they got as far as stripping the lead from the roof before Gilbert took out an injunction and had the demolition stopped. On the 27th of March 1742, Elizabeth, the Old Hellcat, passed away, but her malice kept her firmly rooted at Raby, where her angry, restless spirit is said to be seen roaming the corridors and battlements, with a haggard face and glowing red eyes, armed with a pair of white-hot knitting needles, or she is seen riding a black coach pulled by 6 horses, sometimes moving slowly up the lawn to the castle well, but in other accounts seen flying through the air at night. I'm going to finish this episode off with another look at the local press, and an article dated to the 11th of April 1928 from the Yorkshire Evening Post. The article's title was simply, "People Who Believe in Ghosts." Many of the older folk who live on the borderland along the upper reaches of the Tees have a real belief in spooks and kelpies, and for them the sighing of the wind and the running of water, which is heard everywhere, are as ghost music. "It's all very well for you town folk to talk about superstition," said a clergyman who ministers in one of the Dale villages, "but we who have been all our lives among these hills have been right at the feet of nature and can interpret her signs better than you who spend your time among the man-made things and artificial light. Laugh if you will, but I will tell you, we had in our mind a story current in this neighbourhood. If my bones had been hidden beneath a hearthstone, I should worry folk until they were properly buried." You come across the same outlook in the valley on both sides of the river. Some people with an experience extending to the days long before the railway came, having a profound belief in apparitions, and others at least treating the matter with respect. There is a man getting on for 90 years of age who is the ghost hunter of Teesdale. He knows, if not intimately, then by report, all the ghosts, and there are many of them, from that time to time have visited Teesdale. Edward Garrett, one time schoolmaster and now parish clerk, has lived in the place for 60 years. No one knows more about ghosts than I do, he said to me. I've read about them since I was a lad. I have studied them, and I can tell you that if it's ghosts you're after, you have got to the right spot here. He led the way into a room where a big fire flickered in the half-light of the evening. He drew up a couple of chairs and we sat down. As a youngster, he began, I read of the ghosts of Caesar speaking to Brutus, and I have prayed that I might myself see a ghost. But I little dreamed that soon I was to face one, indeed, the only one I have ever met in my life, though I have chased will-o'-wisps over old battlefields. I was staying with my father on his farm in Teesdale, was going to the local inn to fetch some tobacco when something arose in front of me. There was a little boy wearing a coat with a red round cap on his head. He looked at me and smiled and then vanished into the hedge. When you hear about people's hair standing upright, you may be certain that such a thing can happen. Well, he went on, I told this to one of my servants. Oh, he said, not at all surprised. That'll be little Jack Stevens. He was missed when folks were loading coals into a truck out Cockfield way, and he wasn't seen any more until they found him dead in the bottom of the truck when they took the coals out again. He'd be walking along the roads he loved. Thus was young Edward's wish to see a ghost fulfilled. Having got over the first fright, his interest in apparitions doubled. He related how, upon hearing of the appearance of the known spooks which walked about the river banks, he would put on his hat and coat and go in search of them, but he has never seen another. That they exist in some form he has no doubt, but he has confessed to me that he couldn't quite work them out like a mathematical problem. Yet he declares that an old monk still visits the river at Eggleston Bridge, and was seen by a friend of his within the last 12 months. There was formerly a ford at this point of the Tees, with the usual chapel for the prayers for those who proposed to cross. Later there was a chapel on the bridge. Locally it is held that one of the pre-Reformation clergy, probably one in charge of the first chapel, still wanders about searching for something he cannot find. The last time he appeared in his monk's habit, he went into the bedroom of my friend, said Mr. Garrett. My friend exclaimed, Now then, be quiet. What's disturbing you now? The monk never answered, but just glided by. Some years ago, several of the local inhabitants saw an old-fashioned woman with a little white dog, which used to appear on the Eggleston and Staindrop road, and it is related that on one occasion the apparition made such an impression on one woman that her husband set about making inquiries as to the owner of the animal. Of course, there was no such animal in the village, and that it was connected with someone who had once lived there cannot be doubted, for later the skeleton of a woman was found under the hearthstone of one of the farmhouses, and since the bones have been buried, neither the ghost of the dog nor the woman have disturbed the neighbourhood. Other ghosts which this ghost hunt has come across includes one which went to Gastwick Hill, once the resting place for coffins, and wandered about the bedroom of an old house, and another, or it may have been the same one, had been known to shake hands with a man in bed. Mr. Garrett said he had heard, but not seen, the cart which, with its load of rattling stones, has run along the road at night to disturb more than once the border people of those parts. One night I heard it come rumbling along, he said, and though I rushed down the garden gate, it had gone. I don't attempt to explain these things, added Mr. Garrett, I just take note of them. It is a thing that has interested me ever since I used to play with a couple of skulls that so unnerved the house that they were taken away. All up and down Teesdale you may get such stories, and there is something about this border country that lends them almost atmosphere, for while the wind gives its tearful sigh, white-faced houses over the river look down with blinking windows onto the bleak Yorkshire hills, and the houses clustered at their foot. Until next time, have a great week and stay safe.